This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Welcome to the X-Cast. The truth is in here. I'm your host for today, Russ Hugo, and joining me is Wayne Talbot. How's it going, Wayne?
Good. How's it going, Russell?
Oh, not too bad. Although we got a doozy here potentially if the Facebook comments or anything to go by. We're going to be talking about episode 11 of season 4, El Mundo Gira, and that originally aired the 12th of January, 1997. So, to start off with, maybe give me a number out of 10 that you would rate this episode.
I'd probably be middling, be 5 out of 10, I'd say.
Okay, nice. Yeah. Do you have an idea of what the IMDb has rated it?
I think it's like 7.
Yeah, good memory.
Yeah.
So yeah, 7 out of 10, that's fairly low for the season, but, you know, considering how controversial and how this is not held in the highest esteem by X-Files fans, so it's comparable. I am going to have to give it, unfortunately, maybe more like a 3, and we'll get into it, and I think it kind of depends on how much the direction and the script can actually convey the conceit they're going for, but let's have some fun talking about the episode. So the world turns like lint glued to cashews. So start off, that is obviously the major conceit. Maybe right out of the gate, we have an episode that is clearly homaging soap operas. It's named after a popular United States soap opera, The World Turns, and perhaps it's also a telenovela, I don't know. Have you ever watched any telenovelas, any Mexican or other Latin American soap operas?
I know, like, I mean, I've seen them. It's funny, I'm aware of them, and I've seen them in other shows being kind of homaged in that way. Like, you always see shows having them. I think they were actually homaged in Supernatural in a similar way as well, but they kind of, they don't, obviously the shows don't take themselves too seriously, and they're very, very much over the top. But it's always a case of you're watching another TV show and you're kind of seeing the other characters in that show's reaction to that type of storytelling, like a soap opera type thing. But yeah, no, it wouldn't be something that I would seek out myself.
One of the things that I always found odd is a lot of the stuff they parody when it comes to telenovelas were very common, maybe are still common in modern soap operas, but the soap operas my friends' parents would watch in the 80s, it just seems like the same thing. I find the tone of it seems very consistent cross-culturally, and I always found it odd that in modern day that the telenovelas are this especially over-the-top dramatic thing, so maybe there's elements of it that because I've never actually watched any, other than little snippets of clips, you know, you'll see when you're traveling or something, to really get why is it so special, and compared to a lot of the parodies that were done in the 80s and 90s about U.S. soap operas, so I am coming into this considerably ignorant. I'll admit that right out of the gate. And at any point, there's a lot of hot button issues. Feel free to jump in and when you want to tackle them. Once we get to the Facebook comments, and I have some IMDb comments to talk about too, we can really get into the meat then too if we want. It starts off in a migrant worker camp in the San Joaquin Valley in California, and it's an implied romance between two brothers and a woman. There is a big flashing light. In my memory, when I first watched it, I thought it was lightning at some point, but it's not necessarily. It's just a circular shape that kind of gets big and white and closes. It's a fairly simple effect even for the X-Files. And then the one brother, Soledad, is leaving on a truck, and then the other brother... Yeah, so Eladio went off with Maria, and then that's when the big flash of light hits. It rains. There's a lot of yellow color to the rain. Before this, I should back up, we're introduced to a woman who's telling a story to a bunch of other women in the camp.
Yeah.
and she's going to tell you what really happened. So it's sort of a framing device. It's an odd framing device that I don't remember because it sort of wraps up about 80% of the way through the episode, as opposed to traditionally that would be the story would be framed by it, but instead it's more interstitial. And she's watching once Maria and Eladio leave, and then at that point they find the body of Maria. There's also a dead goat. And there's kind of this horrifying makeup, very effective, I think, of the mouth being eaten away, the eyes being eaten away, and that is pretty much where we cut to the credits. So what are your thoughts on the cold open?
I had to laugh when I remember watching this actual episode, and it's like, it says that the migrant camp is somewhere in, I think it's somewhere that is meant to be a sunny, kind of like an arid kind of, you think it is an arid kind of sunny place somewhere in California, or kind of like, down towards the border, and it's a green swampy looking area, and there's like these little huts that are dotted around the place. But as you said, it starts off with it's a framing device of an old Mexican woman telling, or an elderly Mexican woman telling a story like of how she saw the chupacabras, and that's how she first saw them. And it makes you believe, when I first saw it, I was like, it's making me believe that this has like been told after she saw it when she was younger. But it's like, I saw this last week. It's not a case of like, it starts off, she's telling the tale that's like, it's an old wives' tale that she saw the chupacabras and she is aware of the thing. But then as it happens, it's just like, as you said, it gets wrapped up around 80% into the story. And it's like, she's telling the story that like happened only a couple of days ago. So it didn't. I didn't see it as a very well framed beginning. Like the whole thing about the sister, or the girl running off with the second brother, because there was a storm coming and the goats got chased away, and 3 goats got away, and one of the goats was the one that was killed. You're right though. The makeup was nice. I'm a big horror fan, like a massive horror fan, and I like a bit of horror makeup, particularly effective ones like that, like the peeled back skin over the lips where you just see the teeth, and then the kind of the eyes look like they've been burnt out of the sockets. Look, it looked cool. It is very inconsistent with what comes after it, though. With regards to the rest of the makeup and the effects and the kind of what actually, as the story unfolds and you find out what the actual issue is and what the problem is with the story, the effects that other victims are under it isn't replicated as much like as that particular death. So that death is all about the shock of the teeth being, like the skin being peeled back off the face around the teeth, and then the eyes look like they've been burnt out of the sockets. So there is an inconsistency there that I like. When it started, I was like, okay, great, bit of horror here, and then as it happened, as the thing went on, after the credits came up, there's a few more deaths, and the deaths aren't as consistent as they were. They aren't consistent with the symptoms that the first death is seen with.
Those are all great points. There's 2 things you raise, actually. One is about the environment of Vancouver not working so well for California. And when I was watching this, I thought some of the few episodes I think really could have benefited in being part of season 6 would have been this episode. And not just for the environment. One of my issues is the idea that they're doing sort of an homage to Mexican soap operas. They don't go far enough. Yeah. And it takes itself too serious and not serious enough in the wrong tones. And if they could have gone a little further, they seem to have a lot more freedom and idea of what they could do in season 6. And I wonder if that kind of resolve some of the issues.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't like, to me, when I think of that like telenovela stuff, I always think of like it's cheesy love stories, whereas this plays out like as a horror love story. So I don't. Maybe I'm wrong. Like I said, we both don't seem to have any real experience with these particular types of shows, but I think it didn't hit the right note. If it was trying to do a homage to kind of like the Mexican versions of like, Days of Our Lives or anything like that, it didn't really strike me as something that would resemble that. It struck me as more of a political story about the migrant workers and their plight. So I don't know whether it was John Shaban was the writer, so I don't know whether he just basically decided to. I don't know. He's decided, because he said, "Oh, I'm going to write this story, but it's going to be a homage to a certain thing." I don't really knew what he was homaging properly. I don't think whether he wrote it correctly or maybe it was just interpreted wrong. But I never got that from it. I didn't know until I actually looked up about the show, this particular episode, that is what, well, that was part of his inspiration. Just part of it, but it was there. And I'm like, that doesn't even strike me as something like that. Outside of the love triangle, which barely gets a notice because the female love interest is killed before the credits, you know? So, you know, I don't know. That bit doesn't sit with me at all. I think that it doesn't work at all.
We'll come back into a lot of that when we start talking about the issues of cultural insensitivity and potential racism of the episode. But taking that issue there, what if they would have, like you said, the horror issue as opposed to the romance? They could have done something, a little bit of both. Maybe season 6 going 50% Rain King and then 50% Small Potatoes, but without the creepy sexual assault subtext of that episode. But just deal with Chupacabra, goats, or something like Bad Blood. You could do something where it doesn't have to be so horrific, especially when the subject matter here, we're talking about the exploitation of migrants and marginalized human labor. There's a lot of dark stuff in this episode, and to give him credit, he's trying his best to address it and shove it into the front. But it's already dark enough that when you're trying to bring in something that's cheesy, like a Mexican soap opera, I think it's fairly insensitive. I think he tries some things that are interesting. Whether they succeed, we'll have to wrestle with that a little bit more. But after the cold open, Mulder and Scully come to the town, the encampment, to investigate the death, and they look at the goat corpse and all the rest, and they talk about the Fortean event that likely happened. And this is one of the first incidences where the first line, I think, Mulder brings up, nobody cares about these people, Scully. This is a repeated motif throughout the entire episode, kind of hammering it home. Also, the issue of La Migra is first brought up, and Mulder and Scully have to do what they can to gain the people's trust. And then the first line, I think, this is the first time, maybe it was in the cold open too, but the 2 men, 1 woman equals trouble line comes up. Which I think is where Shaban's really trying to see. This is a trope of Mexican soap operas, but I find it weird. It seems like that's a trope in all soap operas, but that goes back to, again, our ignorance about that. There is, of course, one of the better lines in the episode which talks about the Purple Rain, and good album, deeply flawed film. Another good delivery by Duchovny. But what did you think about the introduction of Mulder and Scully to the case, and then also how the themes of the episode are pushed to the forefront here? What do you think about these few scenes?
I think it's the usual. It's par for the course with, like, they come upon a scene where something has happened, and straight away Scully's like, "What's a dead goat got to do with anything we need to be interested in?" And then Mulder cites the 13 to 14 cases a year of weird rain and situations of animal flaying and stuff like that, and it's generally linked with extraterrestrial stuff. So they get the usual X-File bullet points in there where they say this is why we're interested in this particular case, and then it's brought to our attention that it's like they were brought to Scully's attention that it's going to be tough for us to even try and work this because the people involved are migrants, and then it cuts to a shot where they're standing kind of on the lip of the little edge, looking over the little shantytown area, and then they have to go into it. And I think it's par for the course, usual fare of kind of like establishing why they're there, why they're interested. Mulder gets his little quip in about the Purple Rain, and then off they go. And then of course they go into the little kind of huts and start. People think automatically straight away that they're the immigrant police, that they're there at the chart to kind of pull everyone away and lock them up or send them back to Mexico. And I think it's just par for the course. I think it was just the usual stuff, like to kind of establish why they're there. That's it.
Yeah, fair enough. And right out of the gate, Scully is pretty much on the money and finds out about Eladio, and the hunt is on, and then she goes and does an autopsy, and we get our first instance of how Shaban's trying to portray the neglect and exploitation of this population. The coroner is very casual. I thought this was handled pretty well. In a lot of other shows, the coroner would have either just been neutral or would have been kind of cartoonishly racist. And here it's very subtle, and that's a point I have to give the episode. I think that scene was done pretty well. and Scully's reaction to it too. It was very understated, and I thought effective.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think it was. I actually think it was very well done in the way they punctuated it with that. She was more interested in a dead body that was clearly, like, you look at the body that it's in the dead body that the coroner is currently examining, and it's as if to guess. You just look at the body; it's a huge, overweight, obese person covered in sores and cankers, and you're looking at them going, well, they clearly died of their lifestyle. Why the coroner would be interested in just an average case of not so much natural causes, but there's no real mystery there why that person's dead, whereas you have a mysterious death, pretty gruesome death as well, and why the coroner doesn't even care about that one. She just dismisses it offhand, saying, yeah, she's in the freezer over there, help yourself. You know, because that's what Scully was like, well, I'm a doctor myself, I can do this if you want me to. If you're too busy, you know, sorting out that obvious death over there, I can go look at the more interesting one if you really don't give a shit. And there is that kind of throwaway, I don't really give a damn about this person, I haven't really gotten to them yet, I'm too busy.
And it's at this point where this goes back to your other issue of how inconsistent the threat is in this episode. That Scully and the coroner open the freezer and it's just full of mold in the whole body. It's a fairly over-the-top, grotesque thing. And this is maybe where I'll introduce the topic I'd like us to explore a little bit more. One of my major issues with this episode, just from a structural angle, is the mechanism of what is happening and how our protagonists react makes absolutely no sense. Why did they get infected? And that's likely from that serum. But there's that yellow rain everywhere. It doesn't affect anything else, and no one else was outside. Maybe they had to be super close to the meteor. It's not explained. And then how the fungus affects different victims as we go on. And there's no hazmat. There's no emergency protocol. Scully's not even wearing like a hazmat when they go to the truck later to look at the victim. She's wearing a mask. And they already imply don't touch things. Not even gloves. It's a bizarre thing. Oh, we're going to go catch the guy, but don't touch him. So what are you going to do? The script is telling us that this is a threat, but our characters are doing nothing about it. I don't know if this is something that stood out to you.
Oh, it did totally. And the thing about it is right, the whole point of this is that they're going after a chupacabra, which is it's called the goat sucker. So it's a creature that feeds on goats, and like the legend is that it's a demeaned demon that like only gets to suck out the souls or the life force of a goat. I think that is it's basically sick, so it's an unworthy kind of creature. But the effects don't link with anything to do with that. Like this is affecting humans, and they don't bother to investigate why. It's more about they keep pushing the creature out in front, and not about the actual symptoms and the problems. Even though Scully does find, when she investigates the next body, when you said the one that you find in the truck, that they discover that it's a fungal thing. But they keep pushing that it's the actual, not even Mulder. It's not even, it's usually like Mulder saying, oh, it's aliens, it's this, it's that. But he's not even pushing that it's the mystical creature. He's pushing that it's definitely the individual that they're after. It's definitely that the what's his name again? Was it Eladio? Eladio. So they keep saying that it's Eladio. It's this individual that everyone calls him. All the other immigrant workers are calling him the Chupacabra, and that's kind of what they're focusing on. They don't really overly focus on what you're saying, like, you know, the reasoning behind this particular fungus, how it doesn't affect everyone, how the people that are investigating don't seem to be taking enough precaution to protect themselves from that, because they think it's the individual that's causing it. And yes, they are technically right, but it's also he's basically like the supernatural outbreak monkey. You know, he's going around with this disease that could affect. They keep saying that if he gets into a populated area, it's going to spread, but he's in a populated area. And yet you're not worried about spreading. You're not, as you said, there's no hazmat suits. They're not shutting places down. They're just going after this one individual. They're not making an all points bulletin saying, look, we need to shut down this particular area. If they were worried about infection, if you really think about it, they would have taken the entire population of that migrant town and put them into quarantine. Like, there's no logical kind of steps they take while this investigation is going on, because they know that this is affecting more and more people as it goes along. And even like if they had found if any other story, if they found that body in that truck, the second one, after they go to Maria and they open up her body bag and they see that it's all this very icky looking fungus creeping out of it and she's completely kind of decomposed. That's as the legend of the Chupacabra doesn't have anything to do with that, but they still keep pushing that as the main kind of monster of the week thing, and it doesn't really fit.
No. Yeah. Sometimes the X-Files does this where they're trying to come up with like the Jersey Devil. That's one of the issues it has, is we're talking about the Jersey Devil, and then the actual mystery resolution has nothing to do with it. But not only that, it's just not nearly as interesting, but they keep teasing with it, even though you, at this point, really pretty much know it's not the Jersey Devil. We know it's not the Chupacabra right from the beginning. We know. And even the way that Maria was killed, they don't even try to really fake it. Like, since when did Chupacabras, like, eat, I know they try to say, but, like, eat the lips and the eyes out? I mean, this is not making sense, and they're keeping on with the Chupacabra for the metaphorical reason, for the argument Shaban is trying to make here about how population is marginalized and et cetera, but you could rewrite the story in a way that it would make it plausible or make it more exciting or consistent, or if you're going to go with the mold theme, at least make the threat consistent. The fact that our protagonists, we have some episodes where they try to call and get the quarantine people in and they won't do it. But at least our protagonists normally would put on gloves when they're going to a crime scene and they know a contagion is going on. They're going to do something. There's no one here who is acting with any consistent logic, and it's disappointing.
I do find it funny though that, and I don't know if I'm jumping ahead here when I say this, but
feel free.
But when Scully gets the second body, and he takes the skin sample and identifies it as a fungus and brings it to a specialist, and he basically identifies it as a really powerful strain of athlete's foot. And it's like, so basically the villain in this episode is a very mutated version of athlete's foot, not a Mexican kind of vampire creature that eats the souls of goats.
No. It's not even the athlete's foot. It's some sort of enzyme that is allowing it to grow. So it's even more boring than athlete's foot. It doesn't grip you. It really, really doesn't grip you. I mean, there's no, and as you see the one thing I will say about this episode that I really liked, I do like my horror gore to a degree, and it was interesting, like the decomposition of the bodies and how they did the effects of the bodies in certain states looked good. For what, if you think of the time and the budget that must have been and how much it was put into it, I think it looked good. But I think overall the idea of what this kind of thing, it was basically this guy running from place to place, and anyone he touched was infected with this powerful enzyme. And I just felt it just didn't really do. I didn't care. I didn't care about where he went. I didn't care about who he infected. Because we kept getting introduced to characters as this guy went along that really we had no emotional attachment to, because we hadn't seen them previously, but all of a sudden they're meant to mean a lot. You know what I mean? So, yeah. And also, it bothered me in that there wasn't even a consistency in who they met and how they would get infected. The rules weren't even established, really. I mean, it's implied, just by touching someone or something that someone touched. Like, later they touched the cashew that the guy touched in the grocery store and he dies. But how come Gabrielle, who goes to the house, he's obviously touching the doorknobs and other things, he's sweating everywhere, nothing happens to her. The whole time I'm so occupied thinking, what is the mechanism here? What's happening? We have nothing to go on.
Yeah.
So maybe part of the telenovela soap opera reveal is towards the end. That's another thing, is we're introducing these characters, but who's Gabrielle? And at the end, they're cousins? Okay. I mean, why did you wait to tell us that? That would have helped us connect to her earlier, and we could actually know what was going on. But I'm going to say that was a misstep on the script. I think what we can do is just kind of rush through the plot and then hit some of the highlights. But one thing I wanted to get your opinion on is, what did you think about the INS agent, Conrad Lozano? What did you think about the character and his role in the story.
Yeah, he was one of the more interesting characters for the best part of the episode to a degree, but toward like his as he comes into it, and he kind of gives a voice to the system that manages the kind of the immigrants, and he kind of gives a kind of a at the beginning it's kind of like he's aware of the plight of these people. He kind of feels for them, and like obviously, and everyone else in that kind of system seems to have. They all seem to be of either Mexican descent. They seem to have some kind of link. So they're kind of processing. He's processing all of these people that are trying to get into America and live a life, and yet he seems to be of that origin, and yet he is kind of managing the system. I thought as a character he was interesting enough. He was filling the role of the usual local law enforcement to a degree, but then towards the end, his character they kind of took a turn with his character because they had a kind of a Rashomon type ending where there was two different opinions about what really happened, and it's not the usual opinions of our main characters. It was the opinions of Gabrielle, who all of a sudden was a voice in this story, and then the old lady that we saw at the start, and then their opinions on this particular character, this the Lazario character. I thought he was good, but I think he was wasted towards the end of the story. Just to kind of, they used him just to tie it up out of nowhere.
I agree, and I think they shoot themselves in the foot, and this echoes some of the criticisms the story gets and some of the Facebook comments. Positive points are the points you mentioned, that we're seeing different perspectives of people of a national origin where we lump people together and we have this identity. We can show them in different spaces and how interact. And of course, it's all going to be stereotyped, but he's at least a little more nuanced and be able to see that position. And then at the very end, it's, oh, they're all the same in some degree. It's like, oh, he also believed in the superstition of the two brothers thing. And I was like, oh, why did you do that? He was one of the few non-cartoonish characters. I mean, I guess they did an okay job in the sense of the white construction people who are picking up the day laborers weren't too cartoonishly bad, but they also weren't overly sympathetic. They were just kind of neutral. And the coyote was clearly cartoonishly villainous. And, fair enough. You want to have a villain, and the reality shows that is a fairly cruel industry. So I can get that, but it was disappointing. It was disappointing because I thought also the actor did a good job of maintaining seriousness with a little bit of humor. He had some good line deliveries and the rest.
Yeah, I mean, like he still had a bit of the kind of like the kind of what's the word I'm looking for? He had the kind of he was talking about his old wives' tale, where his mother kept telling him, like, as you said, like, don't get between two brothers, or don't get between the two brothers and the woman and stuff like that, and like anyone that tries to get in the way will be cursed, and he even knew, like, straight off the bat when Mulder came to him, he was about like, chupacabra, like he knew that's who you're looking for, and that he's heard the stories and stuff like that, and he doesn't really believe in it, and he gave solid explanation. He gave a grounded explanation to why that legend exists between these communities, and I thought that was great. It was like, oh, brilliant. He's kind of out Muldering Mulder, but he's like he's the antithesis of it, because Mulder usually comes in and says, well, aliens, and gives it a kind of like the long diatribe thing about this is like these situations have happened and aliens have always thought to be involved in a way, like, look at all the evidence. And then he's coming back and saying, well, look, these people have very little. They're living day to day. They're trying their best to create a new life for themselves, and yet they need to be able to kind of explain when strange shit happens, and this is their way of coping. So he kind of does the anti-Mulder job on it by saying, look, you got to look at this logically. And then by the end of it, then, particularly in one of the versions of the story, he basically he's trying to force one of the brothers to do something because of the curse, and he's saying, you don't want to end up like this. You don't want to be the El Chupacabra, and so it's kind of like, yeah, okay, fair enough, but I think it's a 360 on the character overall.
Yeah, and I know we're jumping around a lot, but they set up a lot of good things. I think Shaban has some well-intentioned efforts that he just shoots himself in the foot with the script at the end, and that wrap up there with INS agent is bad. There's a part of it I did not quite understand. I had to rewind it a few times. The older woman who's telling the story says that Soledad accidentally shooting La Migro is treachery, so God would curse him. But I don't understand why it was treachery. In what way? Because he was supposed to kill? My understanding is wrong, but is that God wanted him to kill his brother? And so, because he didn't, he got cursed.
Yeah, something along those lines. And I think they did that to kind of feed into the final visuals of the episode, the final shot.
Yeah.
But I think it was a case of, they were I think he was trying to make it more about they're intertwining the brother's story towards the end of it, and that if this guy's own blood didn't take him out, then the family will be cursed and forced to live as those creatures.
Which makes no sense. We're now going from a potential meteor with some rain to now it's a curse. And how come? But it's actually no, that's not fair. I'm going to back up. It does make sense because it is explained that they have some unique genetic predisposition to resist it, so that they can get the enzyme and they can spread it. But the fact that it was then that he gets it or something, we don't know. Maybe it's just left off screen that they hug and that's how he gets the disease. I don't know, but it's problematic. And the other thing that bothered me at the same scene, before getting to the real ending, is when the old woman is telling the story, she sees aliens. And I'm going to go, that is probably the most problematic, racist part of the story. I know it's just a woman, it's not representative of the population, but still. You're saying this woman is so superstitious or delusional that she can't tell the difference between people in hazmat suits and chupacabra/aliens. It was an unnecessary tease to try to make the episode way more interesting than it was. To ramble a little bit more, throughout the episode, they're constantly hammering home this idea of these people love these stories, and the chupacabra is a way, like you mentioned, it's a way to cope with these kinds of things. And they're mirroring more in the subtext in the background that Mulder and non-migrant people do the same thing. And Mulder does it with aliens. And I thought, oh, that's fun. That's interesting that people are dismissing this chupacabra thing is crazy. And then Mulder is bringing up the alien thing and the meteor and how Scully kind of confronts him and says, that's irrelevant right now. And she's right. And it kind of dismisses. I go, this is interesting. I hope they can push this through to the end, that there is this commonality amongst all of us, that we have these stories to cope with it, and that these people aren't special. This is a human thing. And then at the end, in both of those two things, I think they drop the ball and lose that potentially well-intentioned and interesting idea. I don't know what your thoughts were on that.
So, again, this is where, like I was saying, that there was a Rashomon element where the old woman is telling her version of the story. Now, she started the episode, the framing device at the start of the episode was her telling the story. And now we're about 5 minutes out from the end, and it's basically her now telling her version of the ending. And I actually thought the aliens were just completely unnecessarily overkill, because they could have just had, they didn't even have to have them, they could have just had the two brothers standing there in fully formed makeup of the creature that they become. Instead, this is a show that for 4 seasons now, the extraterrestrial thing has been teased. We've gotten glimpses, we've seen bits of it. And now this particular shot, we have 5 or 6 fully formed, the usual grey-headed, big saucer-eyed aliens walking over this hill like as if it's normal. And I felt, what? It felt completely out of place, because I think the whole point of the X-Files at this point, even in its 4th season, that it's basically, they're saying the conspiracy is, do aliens exist? They're doing all these things. And yes, we kind of know that they're in the background. There are elements of it there, and only certain people have seen it. But now we're seeing it fully formed aliens now appearing in this show in a story that was very loosely attached to any alien activity whatsoever. And I just thought it was too much. I felt it was very much too much. And it was right at the end, so it was like they just decided, fuck it, we need to make this as plausible as possible to link it with anything X-Filesy, throw in a few aliens, and make sure the crazy woman sees them. So yeah, I didn't like it at all.
I think there is a good idea in this script, but it's so muddled. And what's strange to me is that how on the nose all of the text, all the subtext is text, and yet it is so muddled that by the end you're like, what? Throughout the entire episode, they're trying to make the parallel of, don't chupacabras kind of look like gray aliens, but they don't behave the same? Isn't telling stories the same between the two things? And then they get here, it's like, wait, why? How could you not land that? But I think that could be an interesting story. And they do in some X-Files stuff, but instead to look at how different cultures perceive this. But instead of perceiving how they perceive a chupacabra, like you're saying, how you're perceiving scientists in hazmat suits. Totally throwing up your entire metaphor at the end and basically making them look like, a modern delusional people. So close. So close. Maybe this will be a good point to bring it up, is the direction. And that's where I think season 6, if the director might have felt a little more free to do it. So this was directed by Tucker Gates, who also did A Hell Money, which is another episode that I think has some tonal issues. It's at least trying to do something a little more consistent. But here, it's like, push it one way or the other. Make it the telenovela. Make it about this dark human suffering. I don't know. I don't know what your thoughts were on the direction and how it served things.
I thought the direction was extremely spotty, very, very jarring in parts, and then very stuttery in others. Like you said, we talked about that scene with the coroner. I thought that was very nicely paced, very nicely done. Probably one of the best scenes in the episode. But I think everything after my next favourite scene I would choose would be the scene when they go into the kind of the S-Mart or the small convenience store where you have the guy after he picked up the cashew nut and you could see the fungus growing. You knew he was bunched. You knew he was, a goner.
Yeah.
So when they eventually came upon his body and found what was left of him, I thought that kind of waiting to see that happen, there was nice anticipation there. But I think overall, it was pretty weak sauce direction. Some of the characters felt a bit out of place. I don't think Duchovny got a lot to play with, and didn't get a lot of work. Didn't get a lot of direction as such in the episode, for where Mulder's kind of motive for the whole thing seemed to be a bit meandering. That it was a case of, did he want to prove that it was a chupacabra? Did he want to prove that it was linked to aliens, or was he just there just to get this guy and save this one lone immigrant who was sick? So I think the kind of, usually the motive from Mulder would be, I got to prove this is real. I got to prove the validity of this kind of legend of what this is, and I don't think that was there. And I put that solely on the director and the writing in that episode.
Yes. And the director, one of the issues is there are some moments where you can kind of get hints that they're trying to do the soap opera thing, but it's just not far enough. And some of the acting isn't, I don't know if I want to throw this all on the director, but there's some really rough acting. And I know some of the acting is intended to be over-the-top soap opera stuff, but that's a share between the director telling the actor how to control themselves within the scene that's being set. And it's a pretty universal failure in a lot of the over-the-top. There's the scene where Eladio's freaking out in the prison cell. I got to step back and say my expertise with Latin American dialects is limited, very limited, but some of these accents sound really fake, in the sense there's not consistency. And then when I'm hearing him freaking out, it sounds very cartoonish, but the guy's performance, he's trying hard, and the director is giving him nothing. The way the shot lingers, and then it cuts away, and it gives the INS guy the line about, this guy's better than Eric Estrada. It's a good line. And I think the director's good at setting up the one-liners, but for actually handling drama, oof, no. And not even handling drama in a campy way. It is not happening. And some, even the action scenes they're not framed in the way that makes sense, like when they're chasing him in the truck stop. And somehow he gets through and he's able to run and climb up into a semi way behind and hide. Maybe that's possible, but he doesn't give us any sense of space and how things are working to really make the excitement work.
I'm surprised because, I know this is like the episode's in 1997, but the actor who played Eladio, Raymond Cruz, he's a well-known character actor, and he's a decent actor. He's in a lot of different things. Like people might remember from Breaking Bad or something like that, or it's Breaking Bad, and he's in Better Call Saul as well. Now, two shows that I haven't got a lot of experience with myself, but he is in them, and I've seen him in multiple other movies. He was in the first Resident Evil film. Like, he has done horror before. He's generally cast as the kind of like either the Mexican or a kind of a Spanish. He is of Mexican descent, as far as I'm aware, but he's generally that type of a character cast, but as the military person. So a lot of films that he's in, he plays a military role. But this is one of the few roles that he plays that he's not in a military role. And I thought he was good. I mean, he was very much, he had to be the focus of the episode, and he had to be the focus of any scene that he was in. And he was okay. But I think he was just landed with a role that, like as you said, trying to link it with the telenovelas, I think that ruined it to a degree. And probably he lost any gravitas, the kind of idea of the character would have as somebody who's going through being infected with a disease and being the outbreak monkey of that disease.
Yeah, I will give him credit. His acting, that one scene, he did decent. There's a scene where he was screaming in Gabriella's house. He's projecting so much, the director's doing him no favors. And when he's sick and acting and walking around like that, he's selling it. He's doing it. This is the other thing to talk about maybe a little bit more, is how successfully the episode, I think it is successful in some ways. I don't want to just slam it, but I think it needs to be problematized, how it is trying to address some of these ethical issues. Lines like cheap labor, they pick crops, they're invisible. We keep hearing invisible and invisible. And then we hear things about how they're ravaged by pesticides and these things that are, I think, important. And I think how the scene with Gabrielle being afraid of her employers finding out, having some come to visit. I thought that scene was good in that we're getting some essence of the fear that's happening and the exploitation. That's pretty consistent, but mixing that with all of the other drama is rough. So I don't know how you felt, how effective some of the political, social issue stuff was.
Yeah, I think, see, this is the thing about, and one I had to think of, because I saw the Facebook comments, and I know a lot of people felt that, anyone that commented on this felt that it was a racist, had racism heavily involved in it, which is fine, it does. The question of race is definitely there. But I've seen this happen a fair bit with older TV shows being looked at through today's magnifying glass. And even right now in the States, there's the issue with the caravan of immigrants coming across the Mexican border. So it is still a hot topic right now of this particular type of political idea and the racism thing happening with migrants and migrant workers. So I want to say at the time maybe it was trying. There wasn't a lot of other things out there at the time in 1997, which is not long ago, but it's still 21 years ago. Like, I don't think there would have been that much stuff on TV kind of putting a magnifying glass on this thing. So maybe it was trying too hard to kind of do something. As you said, the accents were questionable in parts, and some of the ideas of what a migrant worker would be doing might be quite dated or may not be, but I think it has to be given some props for trying to draw attention to it, because I think that's where John Shaban got the idea, is that he saw lines and lines of migrant workers on the streets of California waiting to get work, and he thought, well, that'd be, I need to draw attention to this plight. So I mean, I'm sure his heart was in the right place, but the execution left a lot to be desired. I think it is of its time. It's one of those episodes that hasn't aged well. And I think, again, it's the whole thing of putting something that's 21 years old under today's magnifying glass can be tough as well. And we can see cracks that may not have been there originally, but they've grown larger given the landscape of today.
I think it's very clear from the script that Shaban has good intentions. He's trying his best to deconstruct a lot of these stereotypes and highlight the plights. But this is where we get to one of the comments, and I'd like to get your opinion. We'll tackle it now. I think the ending is where it fails. And when I first watched the episode, all I remembered was that final shot of the two brothers on the road. And oh my gosh, is that unfortunate. Because this is brought up in the comments. Yes, it was Michael Little who brought this up, and I really agree with this point of the association of immigrants and disease is a terrible idea. And I know that's not Shaban's intention, because we've spent an entire hour where 99% of the undocumented individuals that we've spent with are not diseased. They're not spreading disease. They're normal people with hopes and dreams and feelings and wishes, just like everybody else who are being oppressed. But we're left on that shot. And that was, it is very unfortunate. In addition to the two Rashomon problems we talked about. What are your thoughts about that and the ending and all the other rambling I did?
Well, no, I think you're right. It's a case of, like, there has to be some kind of tempering of when you're looking at something, and it's an older piece of entertainment, an older piece of media, and it contains some stuff that is questionable, but of its time to a degree. I know you can't forgive everything for being of its time, but you also have to kind of take a step back and say, look, we can't use today's standards or higher political correctness standards against something that at the time was trying to create awareness for a problem. But with the ending in particular, I think, that's a pretty much nail on the head. You can't start off with good intentions and say, look, we want to highlight this plight of these people. There's a major problem. There's a lot of stereotypes, and we need to get rid of these stereotypes, and then end it on such a stereotype of two migrant workers who are diseased and they're walking along a motorway looking for hitching a ride, basically. And I mean, it's like that idea of anyone that's an immigrant coming into any country. Like the idea that has been shoved down a lot of people's throats that these people bring disease with them, they bring horrible people, they bring situations that will affect the current population of a country they come into. I think that's very much tone deaf, and it shouldn't have been how the episode ended. I think it should have been ended a different way. I can't automatically think of a more perfect ending right now myself, but I think that actual image of the two brothers walking the streets, fully mutated as well, like they've mutated into these bulbous-headed, blue-skinned creatures that look quite zombie-like, and I think the voiceover at the time is basically, these people are invisible, they just disappear. Like it was very tone-deaf ending.
Yeah, it's a politically, ethically dangerous ending. I couldn't agree more. I think it honestly destroys all the good intention of the episode, and it's unfortunate. I think it could have been so easy to end it any other way. The ending is bad for that reason, for political, ethical reasons, but then it's also bad in the sense it takes these two people, it's supposed to be a tragic end to these two brothers, but they know that just existing and being in public is going to kill people. And we're supposed to feel bad for them when they're trying to hitch a ride and will kill everyone they come in contact with? Why are you doing this, Siobhan? Why would you end it this way? What they should have done and just either have them shoot each other, they could die from the thing, they could go into exile, try to protect people, like have that be a thing that they're trying to stay away from people, because that's another problem about the episode. Is there's no implication that Eladio is this horrible person, but yet he's doing these horrible things, and is no implication that he's stupid, but he's doing all these stupid things that are going to be hurting people just out of desperation, and it's not dealt with, and that's a problem. Why couldn't we, after we had all this talk about how people are invisible and they're being exploited, we could have ended going back to the camp, and how after all this investigation, the murder was not really solved, nothing's changed. Their situation isn't better, and they're still being exploited. You could so easily focus on that, the humane, the sympathetic, but instead we are taking, not to go into buzzword terms, we are now othering this group and ending on a shot of them not only as disease-carrying vectors who are going to be killing people by being around them, so they're selfish, but they're also grotesque monsters. I don't think there's a worse ending in all of the X-Files than in this episode.
I think the funny thing is, though, the scene before that, the scene that kind of comes before that with Skinner, where Skinner is baffled by the fact that they don't have a system in place where they can find these people. Where basically he's saying, well, the government or the FBI or something have failed in our ability to be able to help or maintain some form of regulation so this stuff doesn't happen. And they could have easily just gone from that voiceover, where they're saying the system has failed these people, to like you said, a shot of the migrant camp and these per people left to the life that they have, nothing has changed for them, but that whole kind of mythos of the Chupacabra, which was completely irrelevant for this episode, being left hanging in the air, like unresolved, like most of the X-Files. They always leave it ambiguous at the end where it's unresolved, you don't know. But that would have been a stronger statement than anything that they came up with. Like actually saying, Skinner admitting to the fact that the system has failed and we can't find where these people are because we don't know who they are. Like, as they'd previously done in the episode, they show that none of these people give their real names, like having to deal with Eric Estrada. And, one of them would call himself Placido Domingo. Like, the system, it shows that the system is broken repeatedly through the episode in certain different ways. And yet, to have Skinner acknowledge that fact to a degree and then end on that note, like you said, it is it is up there. It's one of the worst endings for me as well.
I do like the Skinner ending. I think it could have been a good transition too to have Skinner talking about, how come the FBI can't solve the problem of these two missing people, and then have that transition into a talk about the larger systemic problems. They're invisible and nobody cares. It would have been really easy. And while you were talking too, I was thinking, you're talking about the Chupacabra thing being irrelevant. We could have taken blood as an example with that episode. And the idea of, experiments and talk about, how pesticides, this entire story could have so easily be talking about exploitation of migrant farm workers. And maybe there was something in the pesticides and that's causing them to go there. And we could talk about exploitation by corporations. Some really poor decisions with some good intentions.
Yeah, it's definitely a ham-fisted kind of way of trying to tell an ethical story. And they failed, I think.
Oh boy. Okay, so how about we do some of these Facebook comments and one from IMDb and then wrap it up? How's that sound?
Sure.
Okay, so just going to read a comment I found. It's really critical from IMDb. It's written by The Terminator is Coming 15. It was written in 2016, so it's pretty recent. And so begin with the Chupacabra legend and numerous stereotypical legal immigrants. Literally add overacting to well past taste. Sprinkle in several packets of good-looking special effects. Here's something, though. Disregard, mock, and patronize all non-white American characters until their understanding of the world is entity, I think entirely, maybe discredited, and seen as just something that those, quote, those people believe.
Yeah.
I'm wondering here, this is one of those issues that goes back to the writing. I don't mean to beat it home, but it's funny how much of this is actually talked about in the script, that Mulder and the parallel of other people in the U.S., with the aliens, that's something those people believe. That Shaban was actually trying, I think, fairly hard to address that problem that this reviewer is talking about. And I don't know if I'm off base with that, if you picked up on some of that at all, or if I'm the only one trying to get the whole alien Chupacabra U.S.-Mexico parallel here, but...
I mean, I think that the whole thing about the patronizing thing is there for sure, but I don't know. I mean, I think with the, like, Mulder was very patronizing towards the agent when he first meets him.
Yeah.
When he's explaining that the whole idea of these people create these monsters to kind of explain the way their bad times, there's a look on Mulder's face that's like, yeah, whatever. Like, what do you know? Like, you don't deal with this every day, I do, type thing. But with regards to, like, making the link, I don't know, it's... Again, everything about this episode is forced. I think it's overly forced, and maybe that was too.
And that's what's funny, to have something that's so forced, and yet people come away with the exact opposite of what the script is saying, because it's so forced, it's so tone-deaf. The more I talk about it with you, I think it's a really interesting piece of media, because to see something that is so on the nose and flies so far from what I think is intended for most viewers, and I think justifiably, I can see why people would watch this and get that offended by it. But it's a strange one. So heading over to Facebook, we got a comment here by Maura Jaeger, and ugh, this one ranks in my bottom 3. The X-Files has always struggled with being culturally sensitive, but the characters in this episode seem especially like caricatures. The bizarre and shoddy makeup work doesn't help in this regard. I've also found the story to be melodramatic and dull. The only points I give it are for highlighting the mistreatment of immigrants. though it seems more of an afterthought and secondary to the soap opera, unfortunately. So what are your thoughts about that? Especially, well, we talked about the makeup work, and perhaps she's referring to when they are transforming into the quote-unquote chupacabra versus, I think we both agree that the makeup of the victims of the fungus, I think, is pretty effective. But I would agree with her about the chupacabra stuff just looks goofy. It's not bad, but the design, it's not effective in a scary or...
No, it's not great. It reminded me of some of the older makeup effects from the original Star Trek, the Star Trek series. That's what it reminded me of. Yeah.
The tricky part is the characters in episodes seem especially like caricatures, and that's something that I find, going back to our other talk, that's kind of tricky, is it's really hard when you're dealing with 45 minutes and they're trying to cram so much in, and you're clearly writing archetypes. Here's the INS agent, here's the soap opera person, here's, especially the old woman who'd be like the soap opera consumer, to avoid it. And that, again, goes back to the danger of doing something that's so spread out. You're not going to hit it. Any other thoughts, though, about that?
No, I think Maura has hit the nail on the head with a lot of the things. Like, it's the stuff that we've said. Like, it is the same thing. That, yes, it highlights the mistreatment of immigrants, but, like, it is an afterthought because it's more... I think they try to focus on too much, and they kind of lose their way. And that's kind of a thing. Yeah.
One of the biggest vocal critics of the episode on the Facebook group was Michael Little, and responded saying, super racist and annoyingly melodramatic. This is the worst episode of a great season. Truly one of the most appalling episodes the show ever did. And I followed up and just, can you give me some more details? And he stated that, first of all, I do not believe that John Shaban is racist. I believe he is trying really hard to be sympathetic to migrant workers. There does seem to be an unconscious racism to some of his episodes. Tesos dos Bichos, this one, and Badla. I happen to like Badla because it is a creep show, despite the fact that it is pretty poorly written. Shaban's scripts tend to have a cultural insensitivity to them that have always bothered me. The problem with this episode is that it has a very ugly idea that immigrants are coming into this country bringing diseases. That's something I definitely agreed with him on. I think we all do. It is very Trumpian in that regard. Again, I think that's just a misstep of Shaban. I don't think it's in the same context in a political... I don't think it's coming from that perspective at all. I don't even think it's coming from that idea that would be associated with that. Like, I don't even think it's a subconscious thing. It doesn't come through the text. I think that's just Shaban's not thinking it through. But that's my own opinion. I could be wrong. But he does next. This is something I would agree with this here, too. There's also that awful scene where Mulder mocks the immigrant, Maria, who died, and goes, Maria, Maria.
That's actually a nod to West Side Story.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the immigrant angle of West Side Story, but that's Italians, and this woman died.
Yeah.
I thought it was a little uncomfortable. What about you?
Oh no, I definitely think that again. This is one of the things that I was saying. There's one of these moments that is like, the Mulder joke with the purple rain. That was a Mulder joke. The Maria thing, that wasn't a Mulder joke. That was completely off center. It wasn't like Mulder has that hyper. He is a very sensitive guy. He's very sensitive to people's plights. He does crack jokes, but never at their expense. As far as my memory serves, like he'll take the piss, but he won't overstep the bounds of it. And that particular one, it was kind of like, okay, because it does come out of nowhere. Because he's literally having a conversation with Scully in the car. He's driving along, and all of a sudden it's like, Maria. Yeah, I get the reference, but it's also a bit off. Definitely. Great
points. Yeah, it's really cruel of the character to do it, and it's not the kind of thing he would normally joke about. It's not like when he did like the Shaft reference, he's half asleep.
Yeah.
Or was he a drug at that time? And doing these pop culture things like Purple Rain, there's a time and a place. Yeah, just the delivery of it, I didn't find it funny. But your points are right on the money there. Okay, here's one. So Dan Gear says, I like the episode mostly because I like the legend of El Chupacabra. Not my favorite, but for me it's watchable. Plus you've got that great scene transition between the alien head and Skinner's head. Classic.
I agree with that transition.
Oh, brilliant.
That's honestly pretty third-rate directing, but it's wonderful.
Yeah.
I agree with that. The problem for me is he liked the episode mostly because I like the legend of El Chupacabra. I dislike the episode because I like the legend of El Chupacabra, and this episode was one big fake tease and gave us nothing.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I hate it. Which is actually Adam Silva next says, would have been better with an actual Chupacabra, though.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And then Marlene Stemme says, I like the idea of a story told as folklore within the story of the episode. That scene of the woman narrating events sort of reminds me of the scene in Return of the Jedi where C-3PO recounts to the Ewoks the story of the Empire and the Rebels and the trilogy up to that point. Otherwise, Maria is teasingly funny, but the rest of the episode is somewhat unfortunate. This is fun. Is half the comments, or there's two other comments I think that maybe around there, they actually think the Maria line was funny, and it's like, oh, okay. It really depends what lens you're seeing it through. I was kind of surprised to see how mixed that there were some people who were like neutral and okay with the episode.
Yeah.
So she brought up the woman telling the story, and I think I agree with her that the idea, if they explored it more from a folklore angle, but that is hurt by the thing you brought up, that the fact that she's just retelling a story that happened like a week or so ago.
It's literally, yeah. I actually think it's within 48 hours. So it's like
Wow.
It's like I don't even, like, as far as I remember, it's not even a case of she's an older version of herself telling her grandchild about this. It's like a group of women sitting around having a bit of a gossip. Like it's literally like the weekly meeting of the ladies of the camp getting together and just like, well, let me tell you what happened around the washboards there 2 days ago. When one of the guys was going off to do some work and his brother stayed behind and chatted up this girl, and then, you remember that thing that happened 2 days ago with the rain and the goats? Yeah. Well, there's a whole other side to that and stuff like that. So it seemed more like a gossip situation to me rather than her telling a folklore tale. So yeah.
I agree. They could have made it a little more interesting, but the fact that it's set up, there's candles and it's dramatic. And one thing that bothered me is it starts off and everyone is speaking in Spanish, and then towards the end of her speech, she shifts into English all of a sudden. Why? And then the next scene, she's telling back, everybody's speaking in Spanish with subtitles again.
But that's a writing plot device, you see. They do that in a lot of TV shows when they want to get emotional impact. They would not get the emotional impact if the majority of the viewers are English speakers. So if you're watching a TV show like that, particularly like, say, one from North America, where you would have somebody who's speaking Spanish and they're telling a story, and then to get the emotional impact right before the drop, they switch to English, so the actual impact hits the targeted audience better than them having to read it. Because if they have to read it, they don't get the emotional impact as much as hearing it.
I would believe it. I take that as a point, but I don't think there is an emotional impact to happen there, because there's just transitions from that directly into a bunch of people standing in a camp talking and getting set up.
Yeah, no, I think it's her. I think it's the kind of the tease of her saying, "Let me tell you the story," and it's the kind of, that's the way it's pointing towards. You're expecting, I was there, I saw it all happen, type of thing, So I don't know.
Fair enough. It's a minor thing. I just thought it took me out of the story a little bit, because the language I think she's using, talking about death or something, would work fine in Spanish for most people in North America. You hear it and you're going to be like, oh, okay, that's more portentous. It's being consistent. Like we're listening in on a different culture and a different language in a story, and this is interesting. I think it just kind of cheapened it a little bit, but the producers do that. It's a good observation and no issues. Yeah. I think that is pretty much it from the comments that have any details, some other nice stuff. Thanks for everybody for sharing those. To wrap up, where can people find you online?
Anyone that's listened to this show before that I've been on the Xcast now a few times, and they know I'm a member of I'm one of the hosts of the Irish Pubcast, which is a kind of a nerd podcast. We're based here in Ireland, in Dublin, and we record every second week in a random pub around Dublin. We get together and talk about current events, current news in the world of nerds, as well as kind of what we've done ourselves or what films or games we're playing or watching over the last couple of weeks. I'm also a member of Rogue Comics Ireland. We're Ireland's largest independent comic book label, and you can get us on our roguecomicsIreland.com, which is our website. All of our books are available up there, and you can see all the projects that we're involved in, any cons that we're appearing at, any shows that we're going to be appearing at, any launches that we have coming up as well. Generally local to Ireland are the shows and the launches, but we do sell and ship our books worldwide. So all of our books are available to purchase on the store, and we ship anywhere around the world at local shipping prices, so it's not extra to ship to the States or anywhere else.
Dynamite. Jeez. Check that out. Fantastic. I recommend everybody go check out the X-Files Basement on Facebook. A lot of great chats. It's a great community. A lot of friendly people. Finally, thanks so much for joining me in this controversial, complicated chat about El Mundo Gira. It's so on the nose that they copy the name of the U.S. soap opera, and even then it fails. Very sad. Good effort, but too bad. With that, I will just leave you with some closing advice, and that's trust no one.
The Xcast, an X-Files podcast, is produced and presented by Tony Black, alongside a dedicated group of podcasters and X-Files fans. You can find us on Twitter at The Xcast, and on Facebook if you type in The Xcast, or at our group X-Files Basement, an Xcast podcast fan group, where you can continue the discussion about all things Mulder and Scully. If you want to support The Xcast further, you can now subscribe and become a patron of the show on Patreon. On Google, just type patreon.com/The Xcast. That's Patreon. You'll see all of our tiers, subscription options and perks, which include early access to episodes, bonus content such as commentaries on X-Files episodes, access to a patron chat zone, and even appearing on one of our patron roundtable discussions. We would appreciate any support you can give the show, so just go to patreon.com/The Xcast to find out more. Our title music is provided courtesy of Will A, who you can find on Twitter at IamWillAYE.